friend, Nancy Krygowski. And Nancy Krygowski and I met years and years ago in Nebraska. Her first book, Velocity, has on its cover a picture of Carhenge, which is in Alliance, Nebraska. And we had the good fortune to travel there together. I have adored Nancy's work for years, and I am so thrilled to be reading with her, and I am incredibly excited to be reading with her today, the day after the official launch of her new collection, The Woman in the Corner, which she literally did her virtual launch last night. And so I'm so grateful that you could get up this morning and be with us to read again and just a little bit more about Nancy. So Nancy Krygowski is the author of Velocity, which was the winner of the 2006 Agnes Lynch Starlet Prize. This new book, The Woman in the Corner, they both are from the University of Pittsburgh Press. And it goes without saying, folks, that those of you with us today, I really urge you to consider purchasing books if you have the resources of our readers today to help the readers out and their presses and your bookstores. In addition to being the exquisite poet that I know Nancy to be, she is also an English as a second language instructor at a nonprofit and teaches in Carlow University's Mad Woman in the Attic writing workshops in Pittsburgh, where our reading today is originating. I'm almost gonna tear up myself. My unbelievable joy to be with you here, Nancy, today to help celebrate your new book. To Edward, and here's the thing with Edward ODwyer.
She's back. She's back.
Great. Okay. Folks, you've heard the introduction. Nancy did not get to hear the introduction. You were only gone a moment in between my introduction of you. I did mention Nebraska. I did mention Carhenge. I did mention your exquisite books. And it's a joy to have, and I said I was about to cry with joy at having you with us. So I'm so looking forward to hearing you.
You should have just cried for a while.
Yes. So please welcome to our virtual stage, originating here from Pittsburgh, Nancy Krygowski.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Ed. So that was crazy. Like my computer just froze up and died. So we found another computer and here we go. So thanks for the introduction that I got to hear part of. I wanted to say, so last night was my official launch of this new book, and it was a hard week preparing for these readings. It was hard because it was hard to imagine why my poems mattered in this time. And last night I went into my launch reading not feeling great, to be honest, but I got to listen to some other poets, and it occurred to me that, and I said this then, I'll say it again, that what poetry has done is it does give us a space to slow down, to pause and think, and for me to really think about what our hearts are doing and what maybe we haven't let our hearts do. So yeah, so anyways, so that's what I'm thinking. I hope that you can figure out for yourselves what this stuff can do for us now. Okay, so I'm gonna read some poems. I'm going to start with the first book in the poem. So there's a bunch of question poems in this book, and this one is the first poem. It's called How Old Are You? Some Mondays I unstack old bills, look for signs. I don't care what sports team wins. Since I started playing Scrabble, words make less sense. Which makes me wish for the old days, even if that means I'm old. If this were the 80s, I'd be stamping letters or kissing in ways I've forgotten. I'm still impossibly romantic. I watch young women's asses roam their way to parked cars as they look at tiny screens. Buildings may explode. I still make goofy faces at cameras, though I know how to make my face look thin, chin out, head down, which reminds me, the same greenhouse gases that destroy the ozone help produce erections. Is this why I keep forgetting my reusable grocery bags? In the past decade, I've learned to comb my mother's hair, cut her fingernails. She says, ow, ow. If I could give her my brain, if I could get my own daughter to say what she thinks. Long ago, my grandmother crossed the ocean with a stranger's baby. As the ship was leaving, a woman said, "Can you hold him for a second, please?" Then walked away. Sometimes what happens in outer space is less puzzling than what happened yesterday. So yeah, puzzling. The next poem is, so I'm a bike commuter. When I have a work to go to, I'm working from home now, I commute on my bike in Pittsburgh. And this is a biking poem, and it is called Welcome to America. And I think, well, I don't need to introduce it. Okay, welcome to America. I swing leg over bar, strap on helmet, dodge cars. Old men in trucks yell, "Get off the road," as I head to the rail trail. Round the corner into boys huddled on BMXs, not moving while I'm zooming, so I ring my girly bell. Two scatter. One yells, "What's the problem, lady?" And suddenly, I'm the girl I always wanted to be. Don't block the path, dude. Not sure why dude comes out of my mouth. We weren't, he says, which makes this moment about truth. Yes, you were. It's a free world, he says. No, it isn't. Someone could get hurt. Shut the fuck up, he says. This dirt-haired boy is every boy who ignored me, cheated off my tests, made fun of my breasts. Though I could be his young grandmother, but who is using sense? Listen, little shit, you can't talk to me like this, though clearly he can. He tugs at his shorts, suck my dick, starts pulling it out. Why am I scared? My heart's packed tight with anger and love. My daughter, nieces, sister-in-laws who are like sisters, memories of cooking with my mother, husband, brothers, playing basketball with my father, who once drove out on a snowy night to buy me Doritos because I wanted them. I love my job, my small brick house, cats and dogs. I get back on my bike, aim at his legs. You mean suck your little dick, index finger and thumb marking an inch. His friends laugh. Of course his dick is small. He's a kid. He runs, and I ride home, triumphantly embarrassed at all I know. I am sorry to report that that is a sad story. But I think it says something about violence. So the next poem is, I think, a poem that says something about what we are willing to do or not willing to do. And once again, I think it's a poem that's sort of testing the idea of our heart's ability to open. So this poem is called Mother's Day. And it might be the very first time I'm reading this poem out. Mother's Day. I'm sure the saved bird is now dead. Nest blown from the eaves, and me afraid to write it. See the feather naked, unflying wings. Birds I normally protect. Tie blue flapping bags to deck post to scare away hungry cats. After the falling, I refused to check. Listened to the mother's off-kilter calls. Mother instinct, a call in my stomach that perched in my stomach as I pulled at cuticles, dried hard as seeds. When the trees silenced, I asked my husband to turn over the tangle of nest. One baby bird alive, beak open wider than its head, two others dead. Wouldn't a true mother have rushed to save, hoped the best? I'd turned toward sadness and turned again as he twigged the loose-skinned body, placed its neediness back in. So I'm going to read two more poems. The next one's long, and I need some water. So this has a long title called I Try to Explain the Meaning of Life to a Friend Who Fantasizes Suicide. And a little background, a few years ago, I injured my knee. So I had this crazy injury that kept me on crutches for a long time and I wasn't able to put any weight on my foot. So I was not very good at crutches, I'll let you know. So that's a little background. I try to explain the meaning of life to a friend who fantasizes suicide. I've always been a fan of sorrow, loved my mind's meander to the dark, but now, after 6 one-legged weeks on crutches, unable to carry a simple glass of juice, of butt scooting stairs to the bathroom, to the bed, to the bathroom, to the chair, I've scooted close to that big ass question, what's the point? Which I'd cozied up to before, then turned away from, admiring my ability to not give in to that sticky philosopher's trap. What I loved at 19 and what, as I grew older and committed to growing older, still doubled back on itself. What's the point in asking, what's the point of life? Dear friend, you're exiled to inky dreams of nothing, while I navigate a new space-time equation. I can't leave the house, get my mail, make soup because the soup pot's downstairs. Peeing takes 12 minutes, getting dressed 32. I get stuck at least once a day when the crutches I shove up the steps rubber thump down, and I'm blessed with the chance to be still and cry and inspect the dust balls in the stairs corners, how they're made of cat hairs and human hairs and the gray gatherings of dead skin cells, some of which are yours. I study the storied lines in the floor, how slight the change in golden color that marks a tree's year end, the start of another. The crass nail heads the last owner pounded to stop the squeaking. I like the floor speaking when I'm alone. My family's dirt and grease history darkens the wall where a banister should be. Daughter rushing a flashlight to the woods to build a fort. Husband sliding down the dark to turn up the heat so we can make love above covers and be warm. My smudged fingers after running dill to the neighbor who would die before the next scented crop. Dear friend, for years, we've shared attics of sadness. Now, I want to share this. Meaning comes small as a spider's single thread catching sun. Fast and gone as clouds moving on a black and white movie day. I think about the Polish villagers who less than a century ago massacred their Jewish neighbors, even though they'd held each other's babies, knew each other's names. And the Syrian man who brings me homemade bread because he's afraid of being hated in his home of refuge. Our lives are small, and the world's beauty is scuffed, muffled. But it wouldn't be beauty if we didn't give it eyes to be seen. Dear friend, you're echolocating a tired brain through the drapes of a past that hangs in your way. I understand why a future of no drapes, no dust, no arms to flex and punch, no waking up could seem better. But last night, a kid who doesn't know yet why he's angry threw an egg at my house. Here, let me show you the grace of those perfect empty shells. Thank you, thank you. Okay, and this is my last poem, and one thing I said last night is that poems also give us the chance to think about love. And that might sound corny, and like, I'm okay with corny. I'm totally okay with corny. So I'm gonna end on a love poem. This poem is called Love Poem with Centrifugal Force. I know you can't judge a person's heart by how they drive, but the man in the Mazda who skirts the crossing guard's outstretched arms is saddled, I imagine, with dust in his chest. Fibers that clog a dryer's lint catcher until fingernails peel them out. Or maybe his heart's a fossiled rock, so condensed, so taken over with skeleton's footprints, it's all he can do to get in the car, turn the key. The guard who tells me the day's forecast, who reminds kids to eat all their lunch and pay attention in math even when it's boring, has to jump out of the way of the engine's gun, the guy's oversized mouth chucking anger out his window. I learned how to drive as I was learning how to love, changing gears with my lover's hand on my thigh. What delight to feel my muscle being felt. Behind that wheel, I invented the wheel of my life. We'd get married. We'd make books, paintings, and if someday we wanted, we'd make a kid. Of course, we didn't. We mostly made each other sad, wrapped in threadbare sweaters and selfishness. I learned how to feel with another person's heart after years of driving the weapon of my car through real and metaphorical stop signs, not sure why I was so angry. I wish someone could have pulled out my heart, sent it through a fluff cycle, centrifugal force flinging aside the useless grime. Good luck with your heart, Mazda guy. The kids with their monumental backpacks and lazy clothes are beautiful. And the crossing guard, he glows. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
I had set up at the top of the, I call it a broadcast, I don't know what to call this, that I wanted to share books that I have in my collection from Black and African American authors. And the first book I want to mention before is this incredible book called Of Poetry and Protest, From Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin. It's from Norton, and it is such a powerful collection. If you don't know it, I really encourage you. It's some of the most important voices in American poetry writing about social justice and racial harmony in the wake of incredible violence over history. You will not be sorry if you purchase this beautiful, incredible collection edited by Philip Cushway and Michael Ware. Pittsburgh Connection, the incredible Terrence Hayes. I have like 5 copies of this book. American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. If you don't know Nikki Finney, Head Off and Split, go to YouTube and watch her video of her receiving the National Book Award for this, accepting the National Book Award for this collection. Poet Laureate Rita Dove. And another poet laureate, US poet laureate, Natasha Trethewey. I'll show some more in between after we hear from our next reader, who is Edward ODwyer, joining us from Limerick, Ireland. It is safe to say that I would not be with you here today if it were not for meeting Edward ODwyer at the Buttery on a night in July of 2016. I'm so grateful to have met this incredible poet and to have been able to keep the connection going. And it's a thrill to be reading with Edward. Before I give the more formal bio, I'll just say I enjoy spending time with Edward whenever I'm over in Ireland and going to the open mics. And a favorite place there, if you ever find yourself in Limerick, go have a pint of Treaty City at the Copper Room. And I look forward to when we can do that again, Edward, of course. So Edward ODwyer is the author of 2 collections of poetry from Salmon Poetry. The Rain on Cruises Street was published in 2014, and his current collection is Bad News, Good News, Bad News, which, as he always reminds people, always gets confused. Is it good news, bad news, good news, or bad news, good news, bad news? It's bad news, good news, bad news. Both from Salmon Poetry. He has a forthcoming collection, I believe, this year. He's also the author of the flash fiction collection called Cheat Sheets. It's a really fabulous collection about infidelity. The interesting thing about Edward is that I think, and many people have said this to me, he is the most likely person to be called gentleman that you'll ever know. And so to think that he has written the book about infidelity that's done quite well is amazing. His work has been featured in journals and anthologies worldwide. He's been nominated for the Forward, Pushcart, and Best of the Web prizes. In 2010, he was selected for Poetry Ireland for their introduction series. And he's been shortlisted for many, many awards, including the Desmond O'Grady Prize, the Northwest Words Prize. And he's read at venues and events such as the Kurt International Festival of Literature, the Irish Writers Center, the Villanova Literary Series in Slovenia, Over the Edge, Ovale, and many, many more. In addition, he's also edited 2 anthologies, Sextet and Sextet 2. And it is with just immense pleasure that I introduce to you all with us today from Limerick, Ireland, my dear friend and my salmon brother, Edward ODwyer.
Thank you very much, Sandy, for that. I think I'll probably owe you a couple of Treaty City at the Copper Room for that introduction. But yeah, that's Sandy's favorite place in Limerick. So Sandy mentioned the 2 collections of poetry, and I'm going to read small selections from those, but what I'm going to read mostly are poems from this forthcoming 3rd collection. It actually should have been out in May, so I don't know when it is going to be out. It's all a little bit uncertain at the moment, but hopefully that's soon. I know a lot of books have been kind of waylaid during this time, not just my own. But I'm gonna start things with the opening poem from that collection, which is called Exquisite Prisons. It's a kind of a playful sort of poem. It's one of those poems that knows it's the opening poem of a collection. And it's called Notes from the Author. While I imagine many indispensable volumes to be lining your shelves, I am confident of this book's ability to stand up next to any of them. This is not a page turner, unfortunately, which is a popular misconception anyway. You're just going to have to turn the pages manually. And neither will I or the publisher be held accountable for any paper cuts, either financially or ethically, so perhaps just keep a band-aid for a bookmark. None of the thoughts expressed here are my own. You can be sure of that. I just don't know who to discredit with them, since my memory isn't what it once was. If you don't enjoy the book, keep on to it anyway. You can maybe bring it on public transport, hold it up to your face to deter unwanted attention. The publisher has been talking the book up in this regard and seems to have made public transport users its target demographic. Finally, no trees who were happy were harmed in this book's making, just unhappy ones, trees that had given up dancing, no matter the wind that asked them to. So, since I'm coming to you from Limerick, Ireland, and maybe quite a few people listening have never even heard of Limerick Ireland, and that's absolutely fine, but I thought I'd share a little piece of Limerick with you. During this time, we're all kind of confined in our movements anyway, but so this piece of Limerick just happens to be right outside my door, which is great. And it's the opening poem from my first collection, The Rain on Cruises Street. The name of the poem is Just by Chance. This is the place we have been coming to since. This is the hour, and yet, just by chance that the stars were out that first night, and their light, just by chance, glittering on the Shannon's lurching surface. A near full moon suspended over the centre of Thomond Bridge, just by chance where we were stood on the quay. And just by chance it was the most brittle silence with which we had no words to shatter. Did I think to remove my coat and place it over your shoulders, brushed your neck with my fingers just by chance of how they shook. Then surely it was just by chance of the way of the tide that a pair of swans came floating out from the bridge's far side towards us. And so I learned that swans made for life just by chance. You'd read it somewhere once, but couldn't remember where. As though just by chance you said that, did it occur to me then I may never have a better opportunity to kiss you than there and then, that average Wednesday, Limerick was the most romantic place ever, and just by chance. And so gently, turning you round to face me, just by chance of the arbitrary direction of a convenient wind, your russet hair all blown back, and so, just by chance, the whole of your beautiful face staring back at me, we kissed our first kiss in that unlikeliest of ways. Sometimes things happen so perfectly, and yet, just by chance. So I'm going to switch to bad news, good news, bad news now for two poems. I planned this reading yesterday, but as always, I made changes to that. So I want to read this poem today. It's a poem I don't really read well often. I haven't done it in a long time, but it made somebody cry on Twitter today, this poem. So cry in the nice way. So I'd like to share it with you. I guess it's about missing somebody. It's about distance coming between people, and they're waiting for that distance to close. So it's kind of relevant to a lot of people's situation now. A lot of people are missing people that they love, and they don't know when they're going to see them next in person. So this poem is called Prayer. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll fight off the darkness with this prayer. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll stroke the emptiness and think of your hair. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll pull up the covers and shut out despair. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll offer nothing a kiss in which somehow you'll share. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll sniff for your skin scent within the cold air. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll unwrap such vacancy with such tender care. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll thank loneliness for the love we share. If I awaken and you're not there, I'll fight off the darkness with this prayer. I'll fight off the darkness with this prayer. So it's nice to kind of get affirmations like that. You don't really expect them, and I don't know. Is there a better thing when you kind of need some sort of justification for why you bother writing poems at all. Is there a better thing than genuinely touching somebody with a poem? For me, there isn't. This next poem, Nancy touched on the issue of suicide, and it's, you know, it's a dark place to be going in or reading at a time like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. This poem is called The Whole History of Dancing. When Mikey did it, we all went into grief. After some time, we left grief. Like grief was a classroom where we'd taken a course, listened to our own saturnine thoughts, recounted memories, and received a certificate for doing so. We left, all but you. You seemed only to become more philosophic at first, nothing more. So we didn't worry, because we were all allowed to be somewhat changed for the ground having run out beneath his Nissan's wheels that day. We will all have thought morbid things, imagined ghastly things, how the car might have hung gracefully in the air for a moment, for instance, in the manner of a gull before its fast drop, the Atlantic swallowing it up and licking its salty lips. You were losing the grip of yourself in small, gradual increments, we agreed. All the laddishness was draining out of you, we could see, the smiling rogue, the chancer. You'd still come out for a night on the town, of course, but with each pint we thought might draw you back to yourself, you only seemed more unreachable. Your head bowed, standing on the edges of dance floors, all the girls at last able to move unimpeded by your groping hands, the swing of your pelvis, the inquiring rub of your groin on them. We waited and we hoped, and then the day came, and we were failures. You'd spent ages trying to slip quietly out of existence by the time you slipped your head through a hangman's loop and leapt. And all that time, we'd been an audience, waiting instead of catching you, hoping instead of cutting the rope. And here we are now, thinking of the snap when the slack ran out, and imagining the dance your body must have danced, the loneliest in the whole history of dancing. So I'm going to put bad news, good news, bad news, which is probably mostly bad news, aside for the time being. Oh yeah, some people read that book and they come back to me and say, hey, really, I really enjoyed it, but where was the good news? But yeah. So I'm going to do a poem from Exquisite Prisons, and we're all using our phones a lot more, and that's not just recently, it's over quite a few years now. We're all using social media a lot more, and it's great, a lot of it's great, but one of the things that's always disturbed me about it is this seemingly growing need among people to be entertained and outraged in the same moment. It's one of those things that I kind of struggle to get to grips with, and it kind of leaves me disillusioned with using social media. So I wrote this poem as a bit of a response to that. It's called An Act of Fatherhood. It starts with a beautiful and heartwarming image. A man holds his infant child to his chest, bobs and rocks the child there gently, rhythmically. No one would doubt that this was soothing. The sun is shining and the caretakers have done a wonderful job in getting the park looking so well for the summer months ahead. He is only one of many out with a baby. There are also many with dogs, and many sprawled on blankets reading books, and many on benches eating packed lunches. When he begins to toss the infant ever so slightly into the air, it appears that it should be less soothing. But still no tears come and indicate distress. Soon, as his throes build gradually in force until his baby is flying several feet up into the air, there is a crowd forming around the scene. He expertly tosses his child higher and higher, and just as expertly catches it on its way down. He doesn't seem to notice the crowd forming at all, just carries on obliviously in this act of fatherhood. Dozens of mobile phones are held aloft, taking pictures, recording videos, the possibility of something that might go viral on the internet. He could very well be an Olympic gold medalist at the shot put or hammer toss. So impressive is the strength with which he is able to fling his baby towards the sky and then catch it again as gravity sends it hurtling back down. By all appearances, the baby is still soothed, no wails of discomfort or fear leaving its lips, though it must be reaching as high as 20 feet. By this point, it seems, everyone in the park has joined the vast circle around him and his baby. When he miscalculates ever so slightly, missing the catch, he looks immediately horrified, devastated. Everyone around has heard the sickening thud of baby hitting concrete, seen the little bounce before falling still, a mess of small limbs. He kneels down, panic-stricken, tends to the bundle while the crowd watches on, collectively paralyzed, seemingly unable to believe what has happened is real. All the while their hands still in the air and their videos still recording. As red liquid moves slowly outwards from the baby, covering the surrounding concrete, several bodies slump to the ground, losing consciousness, while one woman ejects a stream of projectile vomit into the grass. At this, the infant's father gets back to his feet, turns to face the crowd with a wave and a smile, takes a deep bow, and another, and another, and another, the 4 main compass points. Then he scoops up his blood-soaked child and begins waving its inanimate hand in gratitude towards the audience. So thank you for bearing with me through that poem. It's probably a bit disturbing for you to hear that. I mean, some people don't really, some people, it takes them a while to realize that before that it is fake, that it's not a real baby, but that's the idea, isn't it? So I'm going to finish with a poem called The Ghosts Next Door. And it's another one from Exquisite Prisons. And thank you so much to Don for hosting and organizing all of this, and for Sandy and her work. And congratulations to Nancy on her new book. And it's a pleasure to read with you, Nancy. And thanks to everybody who's listening. So this is The Ghosts Next Door. They are at it again, the ghosts next door. They are having loud, devil-may-care sex. There is nobody living in the house next door. An estate agent comes by from time to time, some upkeep, straightening the sign out front. The lights are always switched off in there. We've tried banging on the walls, shouting out for some quiet, but the ghosts ignore us. we are talking about bills that need paying, and how the kids aren't doing so well at school, and how the dog's infection has come back, and they are making love, all their moans high and haunting. She died first, he followed 3 months later. Those were 3 months silence, as though he was just sitting and waiting. Immediately after, it began, the sex. Every night we hear them at it, insatiable. We don't have sex anymore, with neither the time nor the energy. We are too worried, frustrated, anxious, regretful. We are insecure. Instead, we try to get some sleep before work. We lay in our bed, our bodies separated, and we listen to the ghosts next door, and we wonder how living has come to this. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward ODwyer from Limerick. I've had the joy to be there, and just so you can see a little, I have a postcard from 1907 of the Limerick railway station, Colbert Station. I've been there many times.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you. As we said, in between readers, encouraged to lift voices of Black and African American writers. And I'm going to just put it up again because it's such an incredible collection of poetry and protest, from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, from Norton. You've never read Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. Her essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, is a critical read. And if you love art, this is an amazing anthology, Bearden's Odyssey. All African-American contributors responding to the artist Bearden, to Ramar Bearden's work. It's a really, really beautiful collection from Northwestern Press. And Gary Copeland Lilly, who is a poet from Washington State via New Orleans. He's read on our Cultivating Voices live open mic. One of my favorite poets, Carl Phillips. Oh, if you do not know Carl Phillips' work. And I'm going to end, of course, with Jericho Brown's book, The Tradition. So please support our writers of color, our poets of color, their voices, their lives matter, their poetry matters. I think Edward is going to introduce our next poet.
Yes, I am. So our next poet is the irrepressible Sandy Yannone. And what I would like to say about Sandy, I'll reiterate that it was, or reciprocate that it was an absolutely huge pleasure to meet Sandy when I did in July, I think it was, 2016, at the Buttery, and it was just by chance. So yeah, it's kind of, well, she's hugely interested. Sandy is hugely interested in the Titanic, so she visits Cove, and she ended up in Limerick from Cove, and heard about this poetry reading from her friend Jim Burke. But it was kind of the beginning of a great relationship between Sandy and the poetry community of Limerick, and that relationship still thrives. And I've no doubt that Sandy has these kind of poetic relationships with maybe lots of places and lots of poetry communities, because, and this is one of the most important things, Sandy promotes poetry tirelessly, and she loves poetry. She loves poetry maybe more than anybody else I know. But yeah, aside from her own wonderful poetry and her book, Odes for Women, and all the other books she's going to produce or has produced, she spends so much time promoting other people's poetry and bigging up their work, and we're all very, very grateful for that. So I'm thrilled that we have the same publisher, and I'm thrilled that I was able to play a small part in them meeting. And so yeah, without any further ado, I'd like to hear those poems. I'm sure everybody would love to hear those poems. So Sandy, Yannone.
Thank you. It was no small part, trust me. I like to share with folks that my collection, Boats for Women, took 21 years to publication. And I like to share that with people. So those of you who are sending your work out, stay true to the journey of your words and your voice. Your voices matter. I don't know any other way to say that. Thank you, Edward. I know a lot of people who love poetry as much as I do, which is why we get to come together so many times around poetry in the places that I've been able to meet people. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for being here, Edward, Nancy, Don, and thanks to our audience here joining us live. I've got a few poems and then we'll head to the open mic, which I'm really excited for. I'm going to start with a poem that appeared in the last issue of Poetry Ireland Review that Evan Boland was the editor of. And I'm pretty sure that every single person watching knows who Evan Boland is. And mourned her passing. This poem was a poem that I wrote for Lucy Brock-Broido, who is a poet who grew up in Pittsburgh. So I wanted to start out with this poem in homage to Ireland and Pittsburgh. It's called Gratitude Workshop, Notebook number 12, 1991, for Lucy Brock-Broido, 1956 to 2018. She said, "Poetry is about demons and to trust the interior of ice. I ruminate over all the advice we must endure in this world, a precarious stack of dishes at the edge of the sink, or a game of midnight freeze tag in a field of no moon." She said, "Don't apologize. Don't explain. If 14 fish swim past, what does the 15th look like? The darkest hour of the recurring bruise." She said, "Court tension and risk. They don't exchange names. They don't even shake greasy hands. About doubt, it's terminal, more than a blessing. Forgiveness is another night of testimony. How is it you remain unmarried? I told myself it was the mattress. I had a bed. I did not lie. I find fire delectable and can sleep." She said, "Be careful not to be too good." So I pretend to fidget with some anger. In simplicity, the simple. Let the day bear out its breakdown of horoscopes like coins that disappear into the glass face of a parking meter. All description must be revelation. I can forgive only the first gray hair. And in response to my longing, I burn the toast. So a little bit of context for that poem. I've started to dig into my old journals, and my notebook number 12, which I was the first one I pulled out, happened to be the notebook where I found lines of things that Lucy Brock-Broido had said about poetry from a workshop I had taken with her in 1991. And I had been really I had been really devastated at her death and finding a way to pay homage. And so I knitted lines from that, of my own abandoned poems, and those things that she said about poetry into that poem that was in the Poetry Ireland review. My reading today seems to be a little elegiacal, and it makes sense given the times that we're in. This poem is for a friend of mine, the incredible dancer Cabby Mitchell III, who passed away in 2017. He was a colleague of mine at the college where I teach. I love him so much. And he was the first African-American ballet dancer in the Pacific Northwest Ballet Company, and he had danced all over the world. This is a poem that I wrote that tells the story about what happened the day that he died, and we knew what day it was going to be because he had been in a coma. And so this is called The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters for Cabby Mitchell III, 1956 to 2017. At the Quality Inn off Aurora and John, I greet an elder brother with a particular train cap on his head, a Pullman porter who stepped out of time while we wait to ride the elevator with my grief and gratitude and whatever else he has brought from his travels. I can envision how he punches tickets, memorizes routes and timetables in the way he listens in this moment. I tell him about you. The elevator opens, we step in, we rise up the spine of the hotel. And even though it's just the Quality Inn, nothing ornate or special or flashy, I think about how this unadorned Seattle box might transform into Charlie's great glass elevator and take me to the highest floor of the sky just to be with you a bit longer, knowing I would need to return, and not entirely sure why the divine chose this timetable at this appointed hour, on this day, nestled inside this week, tucked inside this year in this crazed century. Cabby, at the Primo Grill 2 weeks ago, on my last night before leaving for Limerick, we flirted at the bar with disaster, you reluctantly, when I suggested that I might not see you again if fate would choose to take me away. You, wide-eyed, incredulous, almost scolding me for even suggesting such a possibility. So I returned, and now you are gone. Strange. It will take the rest of my strange life to get used to this strangeness, like meeting a train porter in front of a modest Quality Inn elevator who steps off on my floor and leads me down the hall to his hotel room door, stands there with me for half an hour reciting from John 1, imploring me to consider how I am here and that you are now everywhere as you always have been with your moonlit eyes and incandescent smile. He stands there, no stranger to me than a stranger I feel ready to know, like the first time I met you after 9/11, while we ate a catered chicken lunch from the Southern kitchen. Your hospitality that day never lost to me after all these years. He stands there in front of that Quality Inn door, room 223, never inviting me in. The train porter just opens his wallet, removes his business card, writes something on the back, and hands me his card like a train ticket receipt, sends me off down the hall to find my room, where we'll both open our wooden doors and fall into our separate feathered beds, sleep hard, and wake to the day's breaking news of your leaving, spreading across time and these cities you've inhabited, like a love train not entirely desperate to stay true to its scheduled departure. Later, back on campus in Olympia, my students and I marvel at the unannounced thunder for a full 2 hours. There is nothing else we can do after the emergency alert system promises hail. We wait. The hail does not come. They turn in their reflections for the week, slightly disappointed. They leave. I walk across campus alone, almost taking a detour to your office, then drive home through the city, expecting your lightning to strike me dead. And I admit that I almost wish for this, rather than make it home safely to go to bed, only to wake to my first day without you, to wonder whether grace can find me if I'm not staying at the Quality Inn in Seattle on John Street with train porter Will from Breaking Bread Ministries, looking out for me, looking everywhere for you. So that's a poem for my friend, Cabby Mitchell III. This is a poem that I wrote based on an experience I had in Nebraska. And because Nancy and I spent time in Nebraska together, I wanted to share this. But I also wanted to share this because I wrote this poem after Trayvon Martin's murder, about an experience that I had right outside of my house in Lincoln. And it's really, really a poem about my white fragility and white privilege. And so I wanted to share it with you all today. This is called Drinking Lessons for Trayvon Martin. In my late 20s, I learned little that I can use now, choosing instead to pour drink after drink down my throat until 30. I guess I thought that's what poets did, with glasses never half empty or full, the alcohol moving too fast from hand to mouth to head to linger in its translucent bottles. We'd sit in a sticky booth at the bar at O'Rourke's or Crane River or any place that would have us until we could no longer see the future, let alone care about the clock nearing last call. We chose instead to turn our intoxications into fictional characters each morning when we woke to write with our headaches. Lincoln, Nebraska was a good place to raise these children, the streets safe enough to walk at night, when I knew enough not to drive. One sober night, I said hello to a man on the sidewalk outside my house. He kept to himself, looking down as he passed, then stopped dead, turned and walked back. You're not scared to say hello to a Black man on this street? His voice shaking, betraying his bewilderment as he punctuated his question. I invited him up to my apartment to further prove my point. But once upstairs, I could only go so far, offering water from the tap with a few cubes of ice in a vintage thrift store glass. Somewhere I had learned I could talk to a Black man on a street in any town, USA. But with him, I could never drink. And because I really, really thank you, I want to get us to the open mic. I'm going to, actually, I'm going to read a poem that I read the night that I met Edward. It's a sestina, so it's a little long, it's 39 lines. I'm also really aware with all the intersectionality that this is Pride Month. And of course, in Orlando in 2016, in June, the anniversary is coming up. It's just a week away. We lost many, many people of color, QPOC folks. And this poem was a poem I wrote right after the massacre there. So I just want to give you a little bit of a warning about that it takes us into the nightclub. This is called Requiem for Orlando. I am struggling now to comprehend my pulse, how I still have one, when all the opportunities I've had to die by my own hands with too many drinks downed in bars, then driving while I waited to become my uncloseted self. And now I have nothing to do but pulse with crackling rage while I raise an empty glass, mourning the fact that you, Orlando, lost so many hearts, lips, and hands, all wanting to give back something to the other hearts that beat like hell on that dance floor before the clock struck 1. You, alive. You, raising your drinks to the glassy air. You, raising your brown Orlando hands to the heavens in the heat of your last night at Pulse. And of course, you don't know this. Don't know that death is waiting around the corner like a drunk in a car as you wait for last call. Your early morning heart drums faster to keep perfect time with its perfect pulse as it moves closer to each body on the dance floor, to the one you will leave this world with tonight, with your hands locked tight, pressing each other's calloused palms, your glassy eyes looking forward to the next time you raise them like a glass. Clutch them in the grace of everything that the body waits to release when it releases itself from the tenuous grip of hands in the act. And doesn't your Orlando always resemble the heart? Restless, resilient, eager to demonstrate how it is one with the divine, how it yearns to live from within its own pulse. And now I am pondering the woman who sat next to me, my pulse quickening on my porch steps before we kissed, then shuffled our hearts back into the deck to hide in the shadows of the one true thing I know that I have been waiting to discover with another. And now all the crushed glasses resemble diamonds on the dance floor, and a pair of smeared sunglasses rests on the floor of the massacre's aftermath, inside and outside of Pulse. Orlando, the world will wake up Sunday morning with news of your murdered hearts. And in the 5th stanza, I've dropped a line in shock. My hands go cold from grief. I don't know if I can spare to wait for the one who could be the one, while everyone in Orlando is one dance step away from their hearts shattering like blown glass floats that hands once held precious, waiting for love to pulse. Yes, pulse. And still, I have one. I met someone that night in Limerick, ironically, and Edward probably doesn't know this story because I don't actually share this, who had been in Orlando the night before and had responded, and was a first responder the next day, had been dancing at the Pulse nightclub, and to be in Limerick and meet a person who had been there, again, just by chance. I don't know, there are no accidents, my friends, I think. I'm going to end with the title poem to my debut collection, Boats for Women, which, as Edward said, is in part about my obsession with the Titanic and many other things. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today. And we went a little long with our reading because we interspersed those books for you all. So I hope you'll understand that it was okay. I hope it was okay that we went a little long on the reading to allow us to lift those voices. And thank you all for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you after this poem. This is Boats for Women. Yes, the boat sank. Yes, it broke in two like a stereotypical heart before it plummeted to depths no one could measure. until technology caught up 70 years later and looked its ancestor in the face. Yes is the way the years oxidize the steel, and yes wipes the name Titanic off the bow. Yes are the lifeboats, the davits, the call for women and children first. Yes are the men who cry from the decks. Sometimes when I kiss her, I am leaving a yes on her lips to let her know I will go down with this ship. Sometimes when she whispers, yes, we are staying on board. But there is always room in the lifeboats for 2 more women. Yes is the fact that if we were alive on that night, we would have lived. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, we have come to the time. I hope we can go till 10:45. Is that all right, Don? If people can stay with us?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you.